Story 1. This story takes place a few years after our breakup and the settlement of our house. We had 2 years of 50/50 custody of our daughter, 1 week on and 1 week off, with the handover on Monday after school. This arrangement was good as it helped me avoid seeing Karen most weeks. 1 week, our daughter came down with a stomach flu on Thursday, experiencing symptoms from both ends. This continued until Saturday. By Sunday, she was tired but showed no symptoms. I kept her home on Monday to ensure she was 48 hours symptom-free before sending her to school. I dropped our daughter off at Karen's and informed her that our daughter had a stomach flu but should be fine for school the next day. Without asking any additional questions, Karen made a sound I had only heard camels make before closing the door. Rude, but anyway. 3 days later, I received a call from Karen. Karen, our daughter is lactose intolerant. You need to get special milk. Me. Huh? Where is this coming from? Karen. She had ice cream last night and threw up 45 minutes later. I spoke to my hair and beauty teacher, who said she must be lactose intolerant. At this point, I need to mention that my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, is a qualified and practicing dietitian and was listening to this call as I had it on speaker. My girlfriend said, I really don't think so. Lactose intolerance mainly affects the bowels. Our daughter had gastra last week. The body often rejects dairy foods for 1-2 weeks post-gastra. If symptoms continue after 3 weeks, then it's something to look into. She went on to explain the body science behind this, but I'll spare you the details. My girlfriend said she couldn't make a formal diagnosis as that requires specific costly tests, but she could refer and treat such conditions. She said it's her professional opinion, given that these symptoms were sudden and presented around the same time as the gastra. It's gastra related to dairy avoidance. Karen, you're not a doctor. Our daughter is lactose intolerant, and if you don't comply with the treatment, I'll report you to Child Protection. I thought for a second and said, okay, I'll make you a deal. You get the formal diagnosis, and I'll fund the full cost of the test. If it comes back negative, I'm not paying a cent. Hearing this, my girlfriend smiled. Karen, so I pay for the test, and when I get the diagnosis, you will pay me back the full amount. Me? Yeah, including flights and accommodation. Karen agreed to this deal. I texted her for written evidence, and she replied with okay. A few weeks went by, and our daughter told me, Mommy is taking me to Melbourne for tests. I get to go on a plane. Yay! It's a good time to note that week, our daughter was having milk with her breakfast, and surprise, no problems. Another 4 weeks went by when Karen called me. Karen, so the test results came back negative. The specialist said it was probably gastro-related issues. Nothing that we could have seen coming, but at least now we know. Anyway, the flights cost me $600, accommodation was $150, and tests were $750. So you owe me half, which is $900. Me. Firstly, my wife, who treats conditions like this, said it was gastro-related. You refused to listen, stating we are not doctors, but apparently your hair and beauty teacher is a qualified doctor. Secondly, $600, $150, and $750 equals $2,500, half of which is $750, not $900, which brings me to my main point. We agreed that if the test was negative, I wouldn't pay a cent. You agreed. I then hung up and sent her a screenshot of our agreement, including her okay response. Edit. Is she an anti-vaxxer? No. She has no objections to me having our daughter vaccinated. Is she a bad parent? No. We have different parenting styles, but our daughter is safe with her. I do pay child support, well above what is assessed, which is a different story altogether. I pay half of all extracurricular activities and school fees. I organize and pay for dental work and optometrist appointments, never asking for half the money back. To clarify, if the symptoms were that of lactose intolerance, I would have done the tests without hesitation. The facts are these. We had a lab confirmation of norovirus gastra. The general practitioner advised, as they always do, to avoid dairy for 1-2 weeks post-symptoms. She was aware of this. She self-diagnosed our daughter with lactose intolerance and threatened me with child protection if I didn't adhere to a treatment regimen drafted by her for a condition that wasn't evident or diagnosed. She chose to ignore an accredited and practicing dietitian's advice and listen to an unqualified beauty teacher's opinion. As my girlfriend said, the current symptoms, timing, and general practitioner advice were to avoid dairy for a few weeks. A few weeks after symptoms cleared, our daughter was having milk and cheese again with no issues. There was no reason to worry that this was anything other than what the general practitioner had told us. Story 2. As a new lieutenant in the Army a few years back, I was tasked to be a guest observer evaluator at the National Training Center in California. It's a large desert with small towns for military units to train in before deploying. On day 29, once all evaluations were complete, I was set to fly back to Texas and return to my unit. In the observer controller barracks, I was approached by a colonel, whom I'll refer to as Dumb Freaking Officer. DFO. Lieutenant Bucks, I am taking your place on the flight back to Fort XXXX. Me? Sir, you're part of the training unit. All of the observers are leaving on this flight, and my bags have already been sent to the airfield. I don't have any changes of clothes. DFO. You'll be okay for a few days. Officers must innovate to be successful. And innovate I did. When I returned to my post, I was unable to locate my gear, including body armor, computer, cold weather gear, and other items. Because they flew in 2 days before me on the flight, I was kicked off. I informed my command, and they initiated an inquiry called a financial liability investigation of property loss, in which an investigator is required to determine the reason for lost government property. The investigating officer determined that I was not at fault and that DFO abused his authority to return home earlier. Additionally, since I was left at the training center for over 30 days, I was due additional pay for being away for over a month, which amounted to over $1,000. DFO was found liable for over $7,000 worth of my equipment and had to pay for it, which I subsequently found and turned into the Central Issue Facility. I was reissued a new set of gear. I bought myself a nice chair and put the rest into my government equivalent of a 401k with the extra temporary duty money. The jerk face got reduced to a staff job. Story 3. Hello everyone. I promised if I ever came across another entitled Karen, I would post. So here we are. I had just started my shift and was feeling good. I had a nice dinner, all my good partners were on shift, and I was jamming out to my favorite Backstreet Boys track in my car. Then it happened. Dispatch sent out a call about a disturbance at a local coffee shop in my area. I took the call and zoomed over. I pulled up, and there she was, Karen. I took one step out of my patrol car, and she basically ran up to me. Now, Karen was 42 years old with that really short haircut, and I did notice that she had a big red mark on her cheek. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" I asked her. In the most dramatic tone, she said, "Thank goodness you're here. I was just attacked by a crazy woman in the coffee shop." "Okay, where is she?" Karen pointed to a woman in the shop. I told her to wait outside, she didn't, and I requested an additional deputy to come out. I walked inside and saw a young woman who was very angry and very pregnant, about 7 months along. She was sitting at a table on her phone. I approached her and asked her what happened. So I was in here getting a coffee, just minding my business, when that lady, she pointed at Karen, walked up to me and started touching my belly. I asked her to stop, but she kept touching me. Then, when the barista set my coffee down for me, she took it off the counter, handed it back to the barista, and said it was illegal to sell coffee to a pregnant woman. Then she started touching my belly again, saying that I am a bad mom. I asked her to leave me alone and stop touching me. She then told me she is a mother, and that it's okay. She got really rough touching my belly, and I got scared. When I tried to walk away, she wouldn't stop, so I slapped her to get her to leave me alone. I looked at Karen, who was standing by the door rolling her eyes as the pregnant woman told her story. My partner showed up and walked up to me. Now my partner is a no-nonsense taker, a short, southern, corn-fed, mud-raised woman. I asked her to hold it down out here. I talked to the manager and several employees behind the bar. They all confirmed what the pregnant woman said, and the manager even brought me back to the office to show me the security footage. All of it confirmed the pregnant woman's story. And on the camera, it looked like Karen was getting aggressive with the pregnant woman because the lady tried to walk away, but Karen wouldn't let her stomach go. I walked out to the pregnant woman. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges?" I asked. "Yes, please." I walked over to Karen. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." What? You're under arrest. Side note, in my state, you can be arrested for intentional and unlawful touching of someone. Since Karen was both aggressive and kept touching this pregnant lady, she broke the law. She then started screaming, "You can't arrest me. It is not illegal to touch a pregnant woman. You should arrest the employees of this place. They were giving coffee to pregnant women, endangering the child." Ma'am, no, you cannot touch someone without their permission, pregnant or not. Second, there is no law that says a pregnant woman cannot drink coffee. So please turn around and place your hands behind your back. No, I am not getting arrested. I am leaving. I have to get home to my children. Karen turned to leave the store, and my partner stepped in front of her with a try me look on her face. Karen stopped dead in her tracks. I took that moment, snatched her hands, and put on a pair of cuffs. Karen lost it. She started trying to get away and screamed. She flailed so hard that she knocked off my body camera. I had to pick her up and carry her to my patrol car. When I got there, my partner opened the door, but Karen put her feet on the panel to stop me from putting her in. My partner rolled her eyes, grabbed her taser, and zapped her leg. Karen shrieked and finally got in the car. My partner, the saint that she is, said she would do the paperwork while I took Karen to jail. So the whole ride, I was told how I needed to watch my back, how she knew the sheriff, how I was going to lose my job, and how I had no idea who she was. I got her to jail, and she started going off about her rights. She needed to talk to a lawyer and needed to be released right then. The jail staff was looking at me with that, "What nightmare did you bring us?" stare. So I did my report and realized I still had 9 hours on shift. Luckily, the rest of the night was not that bad. Story 4. This was about 2 years ago in college. I had just moved into a house off campus with 3 of my closest friends. There were 2 other college guys already living there. All of these guys were doing Air Force Reserve Officers Training Corps with me. I really liked all of my roommates in the house, except for one of the dudes that was already living there. He had a dog that would constantly rip up, urinate, and defecate on the carpet, and he wouldn't clean it up. Furthermore, he would yell at us for leaving dirty dishes in the sink, while he was the one making the vast majority of the mess. I had a job working around 30 hours a week, attending school full-time, and doing Reserve Officers Training Corps. I had a job as a server, so I would make quite a lot of tips, around $300 a week. I would leave the cash in my room boxed up because I trusted everyone in the house. We were all going to join the military, and integrity is a big thing. So I went to deposit my tips in the bank after not going for about a month. And I was shocked when my cash deposit was only about $200 when I knew it had to be at least $1,200. I knew someone was stealing my tips then. It made sense because my deposits had seemed a little low for a while. I was furious because I was barely scraping by, working hard to try to pay for college. So I bought a security camera for my room and hid it. I got all the documents from my work regarding the tips I'd made over the past few months. I continued leaving my tips in the box unconcealed as bait. I didn't tell any of my roommates about this. Sure enough, I left for a trip, and I got a notification on my phone. I watched as this jerk that I trusted stole about $300 in cash from me, taking only $20 bills so I wouldn't notice. The next day back from the trip, I scheduled a meeting with our Reserve Officers Training Corps commander. I brought him all the evidence and video footage and told him about my awful experiences with him in my house, with my other roommates as witnesses. Long story shorter, he got kicked out of Reserve Officers Training Corps and ruined his career. He had to pay me back about $1,000 I let him off easy, and had to pay the military back about $9,000 he had been getting paid by them for about a year. In addition, we went to an expensive school, and he chose a useless major, so he is stacked high in student debt with no real way out. And finally, he had just quit his job because he thought he could get away with stealing from me and watching TV at home. He had just crashed his dream car he was working on for a while because he drives recklessly. I still see him every so often on campus and smile at him. Story 5. After being inspired by reading some Reddit stories, I decided to come here, make an account, and share a story. A few years ago, I was in the U.S. Army, where I did 3 deployments overseas. While on mid-tour leave, you would fly in and out of the U.S. from a normal airport. You would walk in, go to your gate at the airport closest to you, fly to the airport in Atlanta, and then fly out from there with a few stops overseas, switching planes and all that until you eventually got back to Kuwait. where the staging area was. Then you would take a military flight to a base with an airstrip close to you, and then normally travel by helicopter to an even smaller base close to you and stay there until a convoy could come to collect you, unless you were one of the lucky people deployed to one of the nice, large, relatively comfortable bases. It was not uncommon that while coming home in Atlanta, people would be there to greet and cheer on returning soldiers as they exited the airport. I got to Atlanta a few hours early, so I had some time to kill. I decided to check it out and stand with those greeting those coming home on leave. Here I am in uniform, greeting returning soldiers with random people, some of whom do this because they are what's known as Gold Star families, others because they are just patriotic or have a kid or brother serving. There are several groups who organize these things. Gold Star families are families who had a direct relative, like a son or daughter, who died while serving. They generally get the utmost respect from soldiers and anyone around who even knows who they are, though it's not like they generally flaunt it. Some will wear a little pin when attending these events. It has a gold border with a gold star in the middle and a purple background. Their car may also have a special license plate, depending on the state, stating this that they got from the vehicle registry. So I am standing there, shaking the hands of returning troops, and I notice that the lady next to me has a small girl and is welcoming the troops, and it looks like she is almost about to cry. I also happen to notice the gold star pin that's pinned to her jacket. The little girl also keeps looking up at me standing there as well. I can see her just out of the corner of my eye. One of the times I look down and smile at her. At this point in my life, I had no kids of my own or anything, but I have always liked kids. Since there was a lull in the crowd for the moment, I crouched down and asked her what her name was. Let's call her Lily. She had to be about 7 or so. She said she liked my patch. The patch she was referring to was the unit patch for the 101st Airborne. I had one on each side. If you're not familiar with the uniform, on the right shoulder is the flag, and if you have deployed, a unit patch under that. On the left is your current unit patch. The combat patch may not always match the unit patch, even though mine did. The combat patch does not need to be worn all the time, though the unit patch does. This fact will come into play soon. Lily was really nice and cute. I started talking to her mother as well, and it turns out her husband, Lily's father, was in the 101st as well and was killed in action about a year and a half before. I didn't know him, but I knew the brigade she mentioned. I was deployed at the same time and heard about the incident he was involved in, but I didn't know any details regarding it. The division is pretty big and spread out when deployed. After all, I don't remember the exact conversation, but it was mostly about her husband and all that. After a bit, it was getting time for me to get going. I pulled off my combat patch and handed it to Lily with a smile, saying something that I likely thought sounded inspirational at the time. She smiled from ear to ear and happily accepted it, knowing full well it came directly from a soldier in the same group as Daddy. I started to walk away after a wave, and I felt a tug at the back of my jacket. I turned, thinking it was Lily. But it was another kid, probably about 5 or so, give or take. Give me, he told me. Excuse me. He pointed to the patch. Sorry, buddy, I don't have any more to give out. His mom then said, don't lie to my son. I see you have one right on your shoulder. You can give him that. I'm sure you have more somewhere. She said it almost as if an entitled valley girl would say it. This triggered her entitled kid, and he started throwing a huge tantrum. Apparently, he really didn't like not getting what he wanted immediately, or he was shown at an early age that crying and yelling would get him what he wanted. I would say what the kid was yelling, but I don't think anyone would have understood it when they heard it. It's like the kid became possessed and was speaking in tongues. I would not have been surprised to see pea soup vomit spewing out like the scene from The Exorcist at that point. I'm sorry, ma'am, I cannot take this one off. She cut me off. I don't see what the big deal is. I pay taxes, and that pays you, so you work for me anyway, and my taxes paid for that patch. Ma'am, I also pay taxes. As a note here, this was just the first time I encountered one of those, I pay taxes, and you get paid for by taxes, so you work for me types of people. I had no idea people like this even existed, and this was far from the last time in my life I would have to deal with people like this either. You work for me. How dare you deny a child this? What kind of soldier are you? The rant continued, drawing a crowd. Inside, I was shocked, but on the outside, I kept a calm and collected attitude. By this point, she had attracted a crowd. I didn't have the time or energy for this. I had to get to my gate and mentally deal with the fact that within a week, someone would likely be trying to kill me again. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but the answer is no. Now I have to go. I turned and started walking. Karen then grabbed me from behind on the throat, hand around the neck so her fingers were grabbing onto my actual throat. I'm confident she meant to grab my shoulder, but had poor hand-eye coordination. Instinctively, I turned quickly and forcibly pushed her hand away with my forearm. The goal was not to hit or hurt her, but to quickly remove her hand from my throat. Nothing more, nothing less. Luckily for both of us, her hand slipped right off, but not before leaving some fingernail scratches on my neck.
You know those insurance fraud videos you see on YouTube where the person unconvincingly jumps in front of a stopped car as though they were hit?
Landing on the hood and rolling off? It was like that. She stumbled down and started with the most fake cry ever, yelling about how I threw her on the ground. I seriously didn't have time for this. As soon as it happened, I backed away, hands raised a bit. I wanted it to be seen for sure since she was yelling that I threw her on the ground that I was no threat at this point. Karen then started screaming, saying I broke her perfectly fine leg and that she was going to sue me. Of course, she uttered that phrase we all know and love. Do you know who I am? I didn't engage at all from that point on. An airport officer was already walking up and saw the entire thing. She looked at me and then the woman on the ground and sighed audibly. She called on her radio, and emergency medical technicians rolled up a minute later. I'm sure the officer knew Karen didn't need one, but I am assuming it's some form of protocol. The entire time, she was asking me step by step what happened. I told her all the details, the same as a couple of bystanders and a few other soldiers around did as well, confirming my side of the story. When done, I stood off to the side and waited. Being a smoker, and this being before the days of e-cigarettes, I was getting antsy. I was hoping to stop at the smoking lounge before heading to the gate, which back then they had at Atlanta, though I have no idea if they do anymore. But no time for that at this point. 15 minutes and I would miss boarding. I was screwed. If you miss your flight for basically any reason, you're looking at the least, a demotion. I made a very quick call to my rear detachment, quickly filled them in on what had gone down, and hung up, sure I was going to be screwed. Emergency medical technicians checked her out, and she was totally fine. The officer asked if I wanted to press charges. At this point, my neck was sore, but I had no idea I had even been scratched. I said something along the lines of, no damage done, so no need, to which she pulled out a small makeup mirror and showed that I had some decent scratches on my neck and a little bit of blood on the collar of my uniform. I was still not worried about it, though. A couple of days and that would all be gone. I let her know that I didn't intend to press charges or anything. After hearing the woman shrieking like a banshee constantly, the officer turned and yelled for her to shut up. In an amazingly authoritative tone, she directed the woman to leave the airport immediately, shutting her down every time the woman tried to argue back. The officer ended with, "You can either leave or you will be arrested, charged with assault." Even though I said no, Karen didn't know that, and banned from the airport. Luckily, Karen got the hint and left, dragging her poorly taught child with her. Her being arrested would have screwed me over big time in further delays, so I'm glad she just left. As if nothing had happened, the officer walked up and asked to see my ticket. Seeing I was about to miss my flight at this point, as this whole thing was a good 50-minute long ordeal, she made a call for a minute on her radio and told me to follow her. We went through a service door and through all these back hallways and even the luggage loading and sorting area. If I had time, it would have been awesome to look over as I kinda geek out about that kind of stuff. Don't judge me. We popped out a door right by my gate. The officer thanked me for my service, and I went to the gate. It turns out she called security to hold the plane for me because I was told they were supposed to shut the gate 5 minutes ago upon walking up to the gate. If I had not gone through all the back ways and bypassed security, I would have easily been 15 to 20 minutes late and missed the flight. I called the rear detachment before takeoff, and they logged it. My command and theater already knew the basics by the time I got back to base. My first sergeant was cool, so we joked about it for a bit, and that was the end of it. A week later, I got called to my battalion commander's office. I was thinking I was screwed because it had to be about the incident. It turns out the widow whose kid I gave my patch to was friends with his family. He was in that brigade when it happened. The guy had served under my commander to some degree in the same battalion, so we had a nice long chat about him, the deployment, and life in a relaxed state. Nothing formal, no sirs standing at attention, or anything. Just two soldiers talking. It's a small world, it turns out. He showed me some pictures of them together and shared stories about some of the things they did. From mission planning, hiking back home, jokes, and general fooling around that all soldiers of pretty much any rank do to pass time while deployed. Like dressing up as Santa on Christmas and digging through countless boxes of meals ready to eat, just to take the candy out and hand one to each of the lower enlisted, or apparently walking around wearing an adult diaper and a plastic toy bow in the command center on Valentine's Day, to sitting at the bar after the deployment with all the command unit soldiers and toasting their fallen brother.